Wild Talk is brought to you by Trapper Gourds, the Wild TV Canada app, and these fine sponsors.
Hello and welcome to Wild Talk. I'm Scott Stirling, and I know I'm not the face that you're used to seeing on this show, but Ryan and Joe were unable to make it for this episode, so I'm going to be filling in. Tonight we're joined by Rod Giltaca from the CCFR and Rick Igercich from the NFA to discuss this buyback program that the federal government's trying to put into place. And after that, we're going to actually chat with Kevin Wilson about bear safety, and this is in light of a recent bear attack in Dawson Creek, BC. Before we get into the topics today, I want to invite you to send in any memorable, crazy, insane footage that you have to wildtalk@wildtv.ca, and it may appear in a future episode. Welcome to Wild Talk, everybody. This afternoon we've got Rod Giltaca with us. Hi, Rod. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And Rick Igercich from the NFA. Rick, thank you for joining us as well.
Thanks, Scott.
So today on Wild Talk, we are going to talk about the federal government's buyback program and what Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba are actually doing with this buyback program. So, Rod, let's chat with you first. What do you think about what Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba are doing?
Well, I think they're doing exactly what they should be doing, which is setting the policing priorities for the people that pay for those services within their province, instead of letting Marco Mendicino or Justin Trudeau or Bill Blair or anybody else set those priorities for them. And I think that they understand that buying back or confiscating, really, firearms from licensed individuals within their province is probably not the highest priority as far as policing services are concerned.
No, for sure. Rick, what are your thoughts? I
look at it as a direct insult to the people of Alberta. It's a deliberate attempt by the federal government to bring Alberta into submission of their federal agenda. And I think Alberta's doing a good thing by challenging it. You know, they control their RCMP, their police force, and they say they decide what the police force does, and I think they're going in the right direction with this.
Well, Rod, you had mentioned something here when we were chatting just before we started recording for the show here, that the RCMP, Alberta, is actually a client. Could you maybe elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, I think in all of the political back and forth that's going on, I think people forget that. Certainly, Marco Mendicino and the Trudeau Liberal NDP government, they forget that the RCMP engaging in policing operations in Alberta is actually it's a business transaction. The federal government says to a province, "Hey, we have the Royal Canadian Mounted Police available to do policing duties in your province, but you have to pay for them." So it's a client. It's like a business relationship, right? And Alberta is they're the customer, they're the client. So they're saying Ottawa is trying to sell them an elite police force that has coverage across the country, and they have crime labs, and they have all this stuff and all these resources to bring. Do you want to buy my product? And the Alberta government says, I'm not sure. It's probably better if we have provincial policing that answers to us, not answers to the federal government. And this is a really great example. Is a gun confiscation program, right? It's not what the Alberta government asked for. So it's just interesting. And I think a lot of people also don't know that Ottawa pays about 30% of the policing costs that Alberta would be subject to if they were just to pay outright for the RCMP to be there. So in essence, the federal government says we can provide you with policing services, and we'll even pick up 30% of the tab to discourage you from getting your own provincial police force, and in turn using the RCMP. So I think, I guess all said, I think a lot of people forget or maybe overlook the dynamics in that relationship. It's a lot different than I think most people think.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree with Rod. Yeah, I agree with that. And the other thing is too, it's at the end of the day, the police force gets its direction from the provincial government, and realistically, realistically, why use your police force and for something that where they're not really needed, especially in Alberta, where the response time to an occurrence is relatively slow. So basically, this goes farther into it. Taking your police force and using it for something that ties up their time. Meanwhile, there's real crime taking place in Alberta where the RCMP aren't responding to, and that goes a long way with this whole Alberta resisting this government request.
No, and you make a very valid point there, Rick. If you go back, was it a year or 2 years ago in Saskatchewan, and where the farmers and folks that lived in rural communities, the response time from the RCMP was quite slow. And if I recall correctly, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but the farmers were taking up arms and saying, look, if you guys can't make it here, we're going to deal with this on our own, right? And if these guys are, if the federal government's trying to bring the RCMP in to do this gun confiscation plan that they have, that's just going to make that much more of a difference in wait times and the ability for the RCMP to do their jobs properly. At least that's what I think.
Absolutely.
Rick, what do you think?
You know what? And added to that, the other problem is where do the resources and the infrastructure come from? Who pays for that? Does Alberta pay for the infrastructure to implement this program? It goes beyond just directing the police to do something. When there's absolutely no infrastructure in place right now, how do you go about that? Who pays for that? And where's the personnel for that? Do you take RCMP officers off the street to run warehouses where they're going to store these firearms? The whole thing snowballs beyond just a simple seizure of the firearms.
That's very true. Now, did I hear something that they were actually trying to get the Postal Service to get involved before the RCMP?
Yes, you did.
Did I hear that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can shed a little bit of light on that.
All right.
Okay,
Perfect.
so as the story goes, when the Liberals jumped on the tragedy in Nova Scotia, and two weeks later, before anyone really knew anything, they were rolling out their gun ban, and they made that promise they wanted to energize their base, and they made that promise to confiscate the guns from everybody who had nothing to do with what happened in Nova Scotia or any other crime for that matter. They made that promise and thought, you know what? This is a great political opportunity, and we'll worry about the details later. And this is something this is how you know that it was just a political ploy, or they would have taken a lot longer, figure out how they would do it, and then roll it out. So as the story goes, the first place they went to was they thought, we'll get the RCMP to do it. So they approached the RCMP, and the RCMP union, the National Police Federation, said, forget it. We have this other thing that we're doing currently right now. It's called policing, and we're already stretched too thin. We're not going to allocate a single person to deal with help you accomplish your gun confiscation program. And so they were rejected by the union. They then went, and this is my understanding of the facts because I wasn't there, so just to be clear, they then went to Canada Post and said, well, Canada Post is authorized to transport to ship firearms. So what we'll do is we'll get Canada Post to mail out, a box for all of these gun owners of these terrible guns that have been in Canada forever, not been too much of a problem, but now we have to seize them. We'll mail out these boxes. The gun owners would put their guns in the boxes and send them back through the mail. And Canada Post was like, are you insane? Every piece of mail sits at least one night, overnight, in mail depots across the entire country. So what? There's going to be hundreds of, so-called assault-style weapons sitting in boxes in unprotected, mail rooms across the country. And the only thing between those guns and criminals are staff. So of course it was ludicrous to even think about it in the first place. But anyway, so they rejected them. And now they thought, well, you know what? We're failing. It's very public. It's very obvious. Let's go back to the provinces and see if we can get them to pay and get them to actually do our gun confiscation program. And now the provinces are saying, forget it. You made this promise without any way of doing this. You do it. And now, of course, when that's thrown back to them, Marco Mendicino says, well, this is reckless. It's clown world stuff, right? And it's upside down world.
Absolutely. Actually, I can go beyond that. They have. I had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with CSAAA here in Ontario, and I heard through them that they're actually offering industry now, firearms industry, to put some sort of program in warehousing and a seizure program together to actually get industry people to. They're offering millions. I don't know the exact number, millions, maybe billions of dollars for industry people to do it because they haven't got an answer. And that's your classic liberal government, like Rod said, clown show right there.
You got to ask yourself, when is this insanity actually going to stop?
Well, I can answer that question. It stops when people stop voting for governments who pit Canadians against each other. Yeah. And they stop voting for governments that want to take the rights that you've had forever. Rights, and not only that they're taking these rights, but they will not demonstrate why they need to be taken. It's all propaganda. It's all talking points. I mean, we're suing the government, as are the NFA is supporting a lawsuit as well. And, we asked the government early on in this lawsuit, it's time for you guys to present your evidence. And they refused. They said, we can't, our evidence is so secret. Not only can we not bring it forward as evidence into the court case, but we can't even show the judge. And the judge rejected that. They said, you got to be kidding me. You're talking about taking property from hundreds of thousands of Canadians, up to more than 500,000 firearms, and you want to roll out billions of dollars to do it. I think you may want to present a little bit of evidence, or I will judge the case on the evidence that you provided, which is one little statement that came in the regulation. And of course, all of our legal teams have prepared stacks, 10 feet high of evidence. So, this is, it's been a farce from the beginning. It's been a political effort only. And the birds are coming home to roost. They're sitting there going like, oh, okay, well, we really have no option. They're looking pretty foolish right now.
Yeah. And with three provinces rejecting this, I'm hoping, I know we've been talking to Ford in Ontario, maybe get Ontario aboard too. I think if more provinces rejected this, and I think Rod will agree. I think that this is they're really shooting themselves in the foot now. Pardon the pun, but I think if more provinces would come on board, I think that would definitely steer things in a different direction.
Well, I can tell you that I was surprised that the territories, Nunavut and Yukon and Northwest Territories, haven't jumped on that particular line of thinking. What do you think? Do you think that they're going to jump and follow Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, and I guess BC is another one? What's BC going to do?
I think, in my opinion, I think it's in its infancy yet. I think after more provinces, hopefully, when more provinces jump on, hopefully they'll take note too, because it's going to affect them guys up there more than urban Toronto. It's basically, you think they'd want to jump on. I'm hoping they do. I don't have any intel whether they're not or they are, but I'm hoping they do.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of moving parts in the relationships between the federal government and the provinces, right? There's money that changes hands. There's support, like financial support for things. I think in BC, I'm in British Columbia, and we have an NDP provincial government right now, so they're not going to do anything against the Liberals because they're all cooperating with each other. But I think it would be a mistake for anyone to think to consider it some kind of signal of approval or disapproval if a province doesn't put out a statement like Alberta, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan did. Maybe they're just like, we're not going to cooperate, and I don't have to put out a statement to say that we're not going to. It's not an issue. We have other issues to deal with right now, not what Marco Mendicino wants in his own life and his political career.
I think our viewers all are wondering what the heck they should be doing at this point in time. So maybe you guys, Rod and Rick, you guys can maybe touch on what folks in Alberta should be doing, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and in the rest of Canada as well, for this confiscation schmozzle. What should they be doing?
I was going to say, well, number one, join a gun lobby. That we're at the both our lobbies are at the forefront of this. I'd say join a gun lobby, and you know what? Talk to your MPs, talk to your government people. Get the word out there. Get the word out on how people feel. It's eventually going to bleed to Ottawa. A lot of times to deaf ears, but the big thing is, and Rod mentioned this earlier, we need to put a government in that is going to change this stuff. But you need to. This goes beyond firearms owners. This is a personal property thing. It goes way beyond firearms owners. And I've been talking to a lot of people, and I've been finding that even non-firearm owners are concerned because it's affecting your personal property. They're going to come and try to seize your personal property.
Well, yeah, and when it becomes, and this is the thing, I think a lot of casual firearm owners, maybe people that just hunt a couple of times a year and that's it. That's their exposure to firearms, or that's the role of firearms play in their lives. Think, well, it's never gonna come to my door. And the thing is, if and even any other personal property like gas guzzling vehicles or what have you. I mean, I'm not going to come up with a bunch of examples, but if a government can reach into your life and just take whatever it wants without providing any justification or any evidence whatsoever, only because it's politically popular at that time, then everything's on the table, right? When whatever your lifestyle is becomes politically unpopular, like hunting, they're already making advances against hunting, how terrible it is, then you're going to be next. So, I think we all have, it's funny because the Liberals, they always want to redefine what it is to be Canadian, what Canadian culture is. And I think we all know very well what Canadian culture is. And hunting and firearm ownership is a big part of it. So we, as a community, we have to stand together. Don't give up your guns. Just wait and see when it comes to this buyback, and you have to make sure that you show up to vote. I think the last 7 years of Liberal rule should have taught us all a very clear lesson, not just on the gun file, but on everything else. But you have to, in our system, the federal government has a tremendous amount of power, the British parliamentary system, tremendous amount of power. So if you want that undone, you have to elect another federal government. So we all have to show up to play a part in that, should an election be called in the near future.
Yeah, and there lies our biggest challenge. There's roughly 2.2 million gun owners out there, and a very small percentage of them have a voice. And that's a real problem for groups like mine and like Rod's, because I would say it's probably less than 5 or 6% if you did the numbers on it. So we need to reach these people, and they need to put their voice out there. And I think then the government would probably listen a little harder than they do. It's a challenge for us to reach those people, but programs like this. And like Rod mentioned, the hunters, the guy that brings his gun out twice a year, but he might watch a program like this and say, "Holy cow, this could affect me down the road," and it definitely is going to affect him down the road. And I think the trend is starting to change a bit now, but it's still for the gun lobbies in Canada. It's a real struggle right now to reach these people so they can get their voice heard.
Well, we're certainly glad we can bring this into the living rooms of the hunting public, obviously, and they need to understand, and everyone needs to get involved on the side where, with the NFA, the CCFR, join the lobby groups, because they are our voice in Parliament, and, well, obviously in court now too, right? So, if we take a look at the banning of all of these assault-style guns, and I know, Rod, you and I have talked at length about this just in conversation. They wanted to get rid of these assault-style weapons, or what they call them, assault-style, whatever that actually means. Nobody really knows.
Yeah,
but
this is an assault-style pen, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. This one too.
Yeah.
But I mean, inadvertently, or maybe by design, we're not entirely sure, but they basically banned a ton of sporting rifles and sporting firearms as well. Things like the .500 nitro, a lot of the break barrel guns that are used for big African game. They ended up banning a lot of those. Rod, I think
460 Weatherby bolt action gun.
Well, they banned all kinds of 460s. We're caught up in that. Obviously, 50 cals. Not a lot of hunting going on with 50 cals, but the only people that use 50 cals in Canada ever were people that, two things, had money because it's really expensive, and target shooters, right? These are high end target shooters. But anyway, that can't be allowed to continue. Apparently, that's the most exigent threat the Canadians are under in the country right now. But also semi-automatic shotguns, a variety of semi-auto shotguns and other bolt-action rifles. So, it's funny because, like I said, I think the biggest misconception is it's never going to come to me. But think for a second. The government says, well, this 5-round semi-automatic shotgun is now a variant of an AR-15, thus it must be banned. It's an assault. Well, how long before they catch on to, well, a Mossberg 500 is used by special forces, right? 500A1. Well, and the Benelli M4. Well, these are assault style shotguns. Nobody needs a semi-auto. Next thing you know, you've lost your Browning or your Remington semi-auto. Your Versamax is gone, right? And you're like, well, wait a minute. And I think this is what I'm trying to impress upon people watching this. That's when you're going to have your realization. You're going to be, well, wait a minute, I haven't done anything, and I've had this gun forever. I haven't been a problem. It's like, well, that's what's going on with sports shooters right now, because sports shooters are the tip of the spear. We're the first to lose our stuff. And don't worry, because they're always after that next most dangerous gun. And the next most dangerous gun is going to be these high precision, high power 308 or 300 Win Mag sniper rifles dressed up as hunting guns. So it's just a matter of time. So all that to say, it's great to talk about this stuff in a rhetorical perspective, but what do you got to do? Well, you got to have to, everyone in the firearms community has to stand up together, because together we're all powerful. But once all of these people, like the sports shooters and maybe the big game, really big game hunters, they're using the big stuff. Once we're all gone, you're such a smaller political block, and you have so much less power. And this is where the idea is the divide and conquer. Only ban a few here. Only spread that to a few more now. Only spread that to a few more later. And next thing you know, there'll just be a handful of people, the break action guys and the bolt action guys, just standing there going like, there's nobody else to fight for us. So the time to stand up and get involved is right now.
Exactly. And that's the thing, and NFA and CCFR does a lot of gun shows and stuff. And we're on the ground, and we talk to a lot of people at gun shows. And it's hard, and I don't want to go on about this too long, but it's hard to explain to a guy that they're going to come and get Grandpa's Browning Auto 5 shotgun out of the closet. Oh, no, they won't. Oh, yes, they will. And, and that, like, again, I go back to this, and there's our biggest challenge. And the only way to get this going in the right direction is get out there, and like you guys said, get out there, make some government changes and talk to people, and take it beyond firearms.
No, that's for sure. So let's change gears a little bit. Handguns. Now, the government has recently released some more new rules here in the last month. Do you guys want to touch on what the government's doing with handguns and the ability to sell them?
I can touch on the first part of that. They actually, as far as they basically stopped all imports into Canada by ministerial power. They didn't. It wasn't done by order of council, or wasn't done by part of Bill C. They did it by ministerial power. So there's no more handguns being imported into Canada, and then it's probably going to lead on to something else very shortly. And I think Rod will probably touch on that with the freeze. So
yeah, part of the new Bill C-21 is going to be basically a prohibition on the transfer of handguns, handgun registrations. So what they did was they're also entering regulation, also known as an order in council, and that's frozen the ability for people to transfer handguns. So what does that mean? I guess it's a lot of legal jargon, right? But means that if I legally own a handgun, I cannot transfer to anyone but a business that is qualified to either take possession of that handgun or destroy it. So those are my choices. So basically, they've stopped the trade in handguns. So for me, I can't pass a handgun down to my daughter. I can't transfer it to her. You know, she's got a PAL and she has guns of her own, but that's just too dangerous. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to create a situation where anyone that owns any of these guns is just going to die off over time. But you know, this grandfathering thing is really a scheme to, again, coerce the compliance of gun owners and pit them against each other. Because me as a gun owner, they're like, well, Rod or Rick, for that matter, you haven't lost anything. You can still take your handgun to the range. You can still engage in your handgun sport. What have you lost? And you're like, well, so nobody else gets the opportunity. So the next generation is just waiting for all of us to die off. And the thing is even if we accepted that as reality, does anyone think for even a moment that if all of a sudden the Liberals or the NDP got an idea that, you know what, there might be some political advantage in doing a buyback for handguns too, you know, that they wouldn't do that they wouldn't spend, you know, $5-6 billion buying back all these handguns and making them prohibited for normal citizens, licensed citizens, to own too? Of course they would. So all of it really is, and I hate to say it, but it's the slippery slope. We've seen it time and time again. It's incremental, and they're never done. And the last thing I would say, I know I'm kind of taking up a little bit too much time, but you know, I think a lot of people out there that don't own handguns says, well, why do you need a handgun? So, well, you don't need any of these guns, right? Handguns are something that Canadians have had for 100 years in this country, and they've never been a problem. Yeah. You know, I mean, there's rare exceptions, but they're outlier events. Haven't been a problem this whole time. The only thing new is the politics aspect of this. So, and handgun ownership in Canada is very tightly regulated. So anyway, it's a bit of a mess, and I think that's a right that Canadians have. If we want to call it a right, we want to protect that as best we can for the next generation to be able to own guns as well.
Yeah, and just to add to that, you know, it's not new. It's not new. Look at the prohibitions, the 12-6, for example, the 12-6 status. I have 12-6 status, which entitles me to buy and sell and trade in prohibited handguns. You know, this is nothing new for the Liberals. They just keep adding on to the pile.
Yeah, and nobody's affected by those regulations other than people like us, right? Like nobody else.
Exactly.
And Rick hasn't done anything to deserve to have his stuff taken or his privileges taken, but yet, you know, he used to have, even though he's the 12-6 has to do with prohibited handguns that were prohibited back in the early 90s. So the one nice thing about that was he could pass those down to his kids. Well, he just had that revoked too. Right. Now, when you die, now the RCMP will come to your house. They'll take all your guns and destroy them with no compensation whatsoever. So it's just it's silly, and I think we forget, what are we trying to accomplish here? It's like we're trying to stop the shooting in urban centers like Toronto and Vancouver. And is any of this going to help? And of course there isn't. So it's all political, and that's why it needs to be opposed.
Well, it's getting rid of handgun owners just using handguns for an example by attrition. You know, like I've got 12-6 status, so I don't know what the age cutoff on that was, but a lot of people don't, and a lot of people that have that status are dying off now, and their guns are going to go back to the government for destruction. So this handgun freeze is going to be the same thing. You know, you pass away, and like Rod says, the RCMP show up at your door. They seize your firearms and for destruction. Is that fair? Is that fair to my kids or your kids or or nieces or nephews or anybody that you wanted to pass that tradition on to? I don't believe it's fair.
No, I mean, and you guys both made a very valid point, is that it's not just about handguns. It's about personal property. It's not just about guns. It's about personal property. Essentially, they're giving no choice but to, and like Rod said, either destroy them or get rid of them to wherever, but you can't transfer, you can't do anything with those firearms. So essentially by attrition, they're getting their way one way or another. It's just kind of the long game, I guess, right?
Yeah. You know, personally, I don't want a deactivated paperweight in my house. You know, I bought a firearm to use it as a firearm, and that's the other option. You know, deactivation. Like Rod mentioned, I didn't buy guns to hold my books in place in my book rack. You know, and it's an all-out assault on firearms owners in Canada.
Yeah. What now? Have they actually implemented the freeze on transfers yet, or is that coming?
That's still coming, and a bit of an update on that is the Gazette, I think, just came out today, and that's basically it's a publication that the government puts out with any changes in regulation, whatever, and it's not in there. So there's still a small window, probably I don't know, maybe 8 days, and anything can change at any moment. Yeah. Right at any moment right now, but there's still we still have a bit of an opportunity. Like I could still transfer.
You know what? It wouldn't surprise me if it happened tomorrow or Friday. Just they're very, very close right now from what our people have been telling us. So it could happen at any time. But too bad we didn't have any more time because of this whole fiasco about when they started talking about this, people went to their local gun shops and they're lined up for 2 city blocks buying handguns when it all started. And now, I don't know if you guys want to touch on that, but the backlog they have at the provincial CFOs is ridiculous.
Yeah, that's something actually that I was going to touch on before we finished up here. Typically, it took a couple of days to do a transfer, and it's now taking over like months and months and months to make it happen.
I spoke to Ontario CFO on Friday, and on Friday there was approximately 35,000 transfers behind. 35,000. I purchased some handguns 3.5 months ago. I haven't seen anything yet. You got the initial paper, but I haven't seen anything come through. So That is the current data as of Friday in Ontario, approximately 35,000. I don't know what it is in the other provinces. I don't know what's going on in Alberta, but in Ontario it's 35,000. So I'm sure it's like that in every province.
That is crazy. So, here's maybe a question too for you guys, and I don't know if you know the answer or not. If this ban on transferring firearms comes into effect in the next couple of days, what happens to the transfers that are sitting out there, 35,000 of them in Ontario, and I'm sure the rest of the provinces are pretty similar to that. What happens to those transfers? Do those still go through, or do those get stopped and thrown in the garbage?
As far as we know, I think as long as you initiated your transfer, I think it will go through unless something changes. But that's the current position. But you know what? I don't take anything for granted with this government. But as far as we know, if you initiated a transfer and got a transfer number, it will go through. That the same thing happened with the OIC when there was a run on AR-15s and stuff, and all those transfers did go through as long as you got in under the window before they put the complete lockdown on them.
Right. Well, this has been very enlightening, gentlemen. Rick and Rod, thanks so much for joining us. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so I'm just going to open up the floor to the two of you guys, and let's I'll let you guys chat about whatever you want to chat about for the next couple of minutes.
Yeah, let's talk about moose hunting or something. Get our minds off this stuff.
Well, I haven't seen any moose yet. How about you, Rick?
No, actually, I just got back from Northern Ontario. I've got a cottage up in Northern Ontario, and I didn't see any up there. I was actually up there a little early for the hunt, but I didn't see any moose. So I'll be going up again when the calf season opens up in a couple of weeks. So we'll see what happens.
There you go. Perfect. Rod, are you getting out afield at all this year?
No, it's been a little bit. It's been a little bit busy. In fact, all summer, and I'm sure Rick can identify with this, but usually in the summertime when Parliament isn't sitting, that's kind of at least for us, that's our time to slow down a little bit, because it's for some reason the gun issue goes all year round in Canada, especially if there's shootings in other countries. It just reignites the same debate over and over again. But unfortunately, they were going. Even though Parliament wasn't sitting, the Liberals were at it all summer. Doing crazy things like sending out surveys for you to fill out and tell the government what guns you have that are now prohibited. Like check all the guns that you have, and sending out price lists and doing all this crazy in the handgun thing, doing all this crazy stuff that's been keeping us hopping. So it's unfortunately, It's just a little bit too busy for that.
Yeah, I concur. It was probably one of my busiest summers as far as the NFA goes. It was a crazy. It's one thing after another. It just keeps snowballing. I don't know when it's going to stop. I know when it's going to stop. I know it's going to stop when we change this government.
That's the part to remember. That's the part to remember.
Yeah.
You can stop this by voting.
Keep your fingers crossed. As long as everybody comes out and votes, us firearm owners, whether we're hunters or sport shooters or whatever, there's a lot of us, and we can make a difference. But we've got to get out there and vote. Period.
Yeah, and we have to be on the same page too. We have to get out there and we have to go for the right people. We can't be out there splitting the vote and stuff either. We need to go for the people that are going to help us at the end of the day. And I encourage people to go out there and I'm not going to tell anybody where to vote, but just look at it where it could help us all at the end of the day.
Yeah, it has to be somebody that's likely to win. It doesn't help.
Yeah.
I hear it all the time. Well, so and so's gun platform's the best. It's like, well, do they have any chance of winning? It's like, well, no. And it's like, well, they don't exist.
Yeah. Do they have a chance of getting one seat? No. So, why split the vote? But anyway, that I just wanted to get that in there because it's happened in the past, and hopefully it doesn't happen in the future.
Well, I'm sure we've all got our fingers crossed, and I'll be voting like I always do. So, well, gentlemen, thank you again, Rod and Rick, for joining us today, and thank you both. And your teams at the NFA and the CCFR for everything that you guys do for us law-abiding firearms owners. So thank you from everyone. And keep up the good work.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
All right, welcome back to Wild Talk. And right now we're going to talk about something that has not been super prevalent over the years, but in the last 5 or 6 years you're starting to see more and more of, which are bear attacks. Before I go any further, I just want to say that from all of us at Wild TV and Wild Talk, we wish both Loset and Annalyn the very best and a speedy recovery from their experience back on October the 3rd. So, but this has kind of spurred this conversation. We've got with us today Kevin Wilson from Wild Encounters. Kevin, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We were chatting a little bit before we jumped on live here about the number of bear attacks and the misinformation that's out there as so far as the number of bear attacks and what people in the backcountry think about black bears, grizzly bears, as hunters and outdoors men and women. We spend a lot of time out there. So let's start there. What can you tell us about the bear attack numbers and why they're increasing exponentially over the years?
Sure, Scott. They, statistically, up till probably 10 years ago or so, there was about 2 to 3 a year across all of North America in terms of maulings that ended in a fatality. We've seen a dramatic increase in the number of attacks, but also in the number of fatalities in the last probably 5 to 10 years, but certainly in the last 5, we've seen a dramatic increase. In Alberta alone, in our province, where we're based, last year, in just over a year, we had 4 fatalities, 2 grizzly and 2 black bear fatalities. That's a pretty significant number. I have looked at the statistics year to year, and it does fluctuate, but on an average basis, that's a pretty high number just in Alberta. We actually have been seeing that in the northern states, in Alaska, BC, Alberta, all over the place. We're seeing a dramatic increase.
So why do you think that is, Kev?
Well, we're doing a lot more things in the backcountry. With our company, we do a lot of problem wildlife mitigation work for industry, and we're even noticing it. Just as a statistical example, each year in Alberta, so we use Alberta as an example, commercial bear hunting, outfitted bear hunting, typically takes about 2,000 black bears a year. Grizzly bears have been off the list. We can't hunt grizzly bears in Alberta. Their numbers have been dramatically increasing. But let's just talk about the black bears for a second. So if there's 2,000 bears a year over the last 2 years as we've gone through the COVID experience, 2,000 more on the landscape times two, plus recruitment, we could be dealing with anywhere from 4 to 6 to 7,000 bears, more bears on the landscape. And I can tell you, we are seeing that increase on the job sites that we're working on.
Did you want to elaborate on that a little more?
Yeah, I can actually. So, what a lot of people are seeing firsthand, and hunters are a great example because we spend a lot of time in remote areas, especially seasonally in the spring and the fall. Um, we are seeing a dramatic increase. Even people that are backpacking, hiking, and that sort of thing. Let's go back to the grizzly bear equation. We are seeing a dramatic increase in grizzly bears. I just saw a note from a friend that said that in 3 different drainages, I think he counted 7 different grizzly bears, I believe, and that's just too many. We are seeing. I know of a rancher in southern Alberta, for example. He actually photographed a dozen grizzly bears on his grain bins, around his grain
Wow.
bins. That's in ranch land. That's not even up in the hills. So we are seeing a very dramatic increase. The predator prey cycle tends to ebb and flow and tends to go up and down naturally. The problem
Hmm.
is we've had a lot of man-made impositions. And so those man-made impositions, be it industry, being, blocking the ability to keep problem wildlife in check,
Hmm.
those all attribute to an increase in numbers. So when we stop people from hunting grizzly bears, for instance, and I'm not advocating necessarily for hunting when I'm saying this, but I'm saying it's a valid management tool. Um,
Hmm.
we have to acknowledge that, and the same applies to black bears. Our black bear numbers are unbelievable, pretty much everywhere around the province, with the exception, of course, of the prairie grasslands. But even
Right.
on the prairie grasslands, we're now seeing grizzlies going back onto the prairie where they were 100 years ago.
Yep.
I'm hearing stories of grizzly bears that are dying in dugouts 25 miles out on the prairie, just drowning. This is incidental, but the fact is the bear was there.
No,
And that's not
absolutely.
typically what we've been seeing the last 20, 30, 40 years and more.
Let's jump back to the events of October 3rd. Um, I'm sure you've heard about what happened and read some articles. Um, I got a little bit of information. What was your take on what that bear was up to, and why do you think that it attacked the way it did?
Sure. Yeah. So that was a black bear attack. My
Hmm.
understanding, based on the stories that I heard and read, essentially through mainstream media, suggested that it was a predaceous attack. Essentially, when people have conflicts with bears, you're dealing with two different things. You're dealing with either a defensive attack or a predaceous attack or a non-defensive. And predaceous can be an extreme grade of a non-defensive attack.
Hmm.
Defensive means essentially that bears are motivated to protect young, food, or their space.
Hmm.
I'm careful to use the word territory because it's not so much that in most situations. But if, for example, we're walking through the woods as these folks were up around Dawson Creek, and my understanding is they were on a cross-country ski trail, came across a bear. Well, that bear, by all indication, it probably was not defending anything. It
Hmm.
sounded like it was probably a boar. It saw them as food, and so a predaceous bear um, essentially is a dangerous bear.
Hmm.
Now, an interesting statistic. I was at a bear conference a while ago, and one of the things that one of the biologists said is that he had recently read a study where over 90, well, let's say over 90%, I believe it was something like 94% of all maulings that were done by a black bear that resulted in a fatality, essentially that bear was killed, and over 90% of those were determined, it was determined that the bear had some form of encephalitis. And and essentially what that means is crazy bears kill people. Crazy people kill people, crazy bears kill people. So, I mean, I don't mean to make it so simple, but that's kind of a good analogy, I guess. So for the most part, again, bears in general are not an issue, Scott, until they're an issue. And it's that,
Right.
so what is it? Is it 1 in 10, 1 in 10,000, 1 in a million black bears that's predaceous or that has that encephalitis? We don't know. We don't know what that number is.
Yeah.
But for the most part, bears have a natural instinctive response. If they're protecting food or they're young, the sow with cubs, for instance, or just their space, they can get aggressive. But there's a certain response that goes with that, as opposed to a different response if a bear is being predaceous.
So, what would be your suggestion for any of our viewers who are obviously spend a lot of time in the backcountry, whether they're hunting or fishing or quadding or sledding? If you run into a situation like that, what do you do?
Well, in a predaceous situation, you're in a bad spot. Essentially, you're going to fight back with everything you've got. Make a lot of noise. Um, fight back, grab a stick or rock. If you have a weapon, certainly your first line of defense is always going to be using something like bear spray. You can try noisemakers, but honestly, with a predaceous bear, in my experience, and every situation is different, I'm very careful not to talk about absolutes, especially with wildlife. The textbook says, and in my experience this is true, if it's a predaceous bear, you're going to fight back. You're going to fight with everything you've got. You're going to try to back up, you're going to try to get out of its way. You're going to try, and there's several reasons for that. There's a chance that bear could want to be aggressively going after something that's beyond you, but more than likely it sees you as food. A lot of times people talk about playing dead. Well, in a predaceous attack, playing dead is not the option. In a defensive attack, if physical contact is imminent and you've done everything else, you've exhausted your ability to move back, to move away, to diffuse the threat because you're perceived as a threat in a defensive situation, then you're going to want to use your spray or whatever else you've got that way. But essentially you want to be quiet. You want to diffuse the threat. You want to become more threatening. Where a predaceous attack, you want to be more threatening to the bear.
Right.
Now, in a defensive situation, if physical contact is imminent, you want to lie down flat on the ground, face down, cover your head and neck, spread your legs. And the bear may mess with you a bit. In fact, probably will a little bit. Well, not necessarily. I mean, it could back off. If it rolls you over, roll back over onto your front again. But in a predaceous situation, very different. You're going to fight back with everything you got. Go for the eyes, the nose, mouth. I know of people who have actually fought back because they had a knife in their pocket and they just started stabbing, and it worked. It actually worked for them, and the bear took off. So, there are different scenarios, but again, there's no two exact situations when we're dealing with bears.
Have you ever been in that kind of a position with a predatory bear?
I have not with a predatory. I have had I've had non-defensive encounters where the bear just didn't care, and I believe he was pushing the envelope, and it was a young boar. Well, actually many, but one in particular, I'll give you an example, was coming in close and just didn't care. It didn't matter what I did or said. That bear was just going to come closer to me, as close as he could get. In that situation, I don't believe he was predaceous, but I do believe he was testing the limits. And young subadult bears are a lot like people, teenagers. They like to test the limits.
Yep.
And bears are a lot like people that way. They all have personalities. You can attest to that.
Yeah,
I know
absolutely.
you've dealt a lot with bears yourself.
Yep.
Yeah, and really it's a lot of dealing with bears is about interpreting the situation. I often tell people you can't really negotiate with a cougar, a mountain lion. You can't really negotiate with a wolf, but often you can negotiate with a bear. If you read his mannerisms, his body language, his stress behaviors, you can often work with him a little bit or her and kind of bring a result that you're looking for. So bears are a little different that way. You asked if I'd had a situation. Yeah, I actually have had a very bad situation. It wasn't predaceous, but well, I've had lots of bad situations, but the one in particular was a grizzly bear, and we had bumped it out of a food patch, a berry patch, and there was a rushing stream on one side and a head wall of a mountain on another, very close, both within 20 feet. And so that bear was essentially cornered. That's a defensive situation.
Yeah.
And that bear actually, as soon as he realized what we were, he roared. And hearing a bear roar is a very uncommon thing. But if you do hear a bear roar, that's a high-level stress behavior. And they are acting in reflex, really. It's a natural response for them to defend themselves. Now, in that situation, normally in a defensive situation, you want to talk calmly, move away. If the bear approaches, stop, hold your ground, that sort of thing. That's what the textbook says.
Yeah.
But looking at the situation, that bear had no opportunity to escape. It was cornered. So I essentially just backed up. Or no, sorry, in that one, my partner and I kept moving. And then and I said, don't slow down, don't stop, don't run. Grab your bear spray. They grabbed bear spray, faced the bear, kept walking, and I just yelled as loud as I could because in a bear in that situation, it's a lot like a moose that's in the rut.
Yeah.
He's in a bit of a trance. He's in his natural response. So the idea was to shock him enough to get him to stop just instantly, get a few more yards away, and that happened 3 or 4 times actually. Normally you wouldn't yell at a defensive bear. But in that situation, that was the best option. And I managed to get him to pause 3 or 4 times, just enough for us to get 40, 50 yards away. And then we could make an escape sort of thing.
And then you were
That's probably the worst scenario I've been in myself.
no longer a threat or a perceived threat to him. And he kind of went on his way and you guys went on yours. And that was the end of it, right?
Yeah, and really that's the goal. So you could see his whole physical demeanor back down, and his roaring was getting less and less each time. That being very different than a predaceous attack like these folks experienced in BC last week, where they probably made noise, and that probably made it worse. And the way I understand the story, that bear was actually standing over them and guarding them when help actually came.
Yeah, I'd actually read that as well. It was the recount from the 2 officers that rescued them. So, so let's in closing here, Kevin. I think we're going to be running out of time here pretty soon. Quick tips on what to do if you do run into a bear in the backcountry. Point form, bullet. Make sure our viewers know what they need to do if they do run into a black bear or grizzly bear in the backcountry doing the pursuits that we all love and live.
Yeah, the first thing I tell people is make sure you do have bear spray with you. It doesn't matter who you are, whether you're a hunting guide, whether you're hunting yourself, whether you're backpacking, even paddling on rivers. Make sure you have bear spray and make sure you know how to use it. That's the big thing. Make sure that marketing strap that's on the bottles.
Yeah.
Make sure that strap's taken off. I see so many people in the backcountry with those, and I ask them, "What do you plan to do?" Anyways, make sure that's there. Make sure you know how to use it. Understand its limitations. Most importantly, evaluate very quickly: is this a defensive situation, or a non-defensive, or unfortunately, possibly a predaceous situation? depending on what that is and what the answer is, that'll determine, your next line of defense. And we went through those options before.
For sure. All right. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for joining us, and good luck this year in the backcountry. Hopefully you don't run into any angry bears. And again, to the two ladies that had that situation happen, we do wish you the best. And we're out. Thanks for watching Wild Talk. Good night. So thank you all for tuning in. And just a reminder, if you guys have any crazy footage you want to share with Wild Talk, send an email to wildtalk@wildtv.ca, and you may see your footage in an upcoming episode of the show. Thank you all for joining us tonight, and have a great evening.
Wild Talk is brought to you by Trapper Doors, the Wild TV Canada app, and these fine sponsors.